The grand assembly chamber shimmered under artificial daylight, a vast coliseum of polished obsidian and floating data streams. Hundreds of species filled the tiered seats, their voices blending into an ambient hum of galactic discourse. In the center of it all sat the circle of thrones, each an ornate symbol of the civilizations that had earned a place in the Concord. All but one. Ambassador Listoval of the Krinva adjusted his ceremonial sash and let his eyes linger on the vacant throne at the farthest edge of the chamber. Unlike the others, which gleamed with gilded engravings and embedded insignias, this seat was unadorned. A simple, imposing black monolith. No banners. No representatives. No signs of presence. Earth's seat. The empty throne. Liz had heard the story since his first days in diplomacy, how humanity arrived in the galactic community nearly 2,000 years ago, observed, judged, and left. No wars. No treaties. No ultimatums. Just silence. He turned to his mentor, Chancellor Vel Rose of the Avanti, a being of pale silver skin and piercing yellow eyes. Tell me again. Why was Earth never replaced? Rose exhaled, a slow hiss of breath through narrow nostrils. Because they were never removed, Liz. Liz frowned. But they abandoned the seat. They cut all ties. And yet no one dares to sit in their place, Rose murmured. He gestured toward the other ambassadors, many casting wary glances at the throne, some outright avoiding it. Every empire that has ever risen feared one power above all. The unknown. And Earth remains unknowable. A deep voice cut through the chamber. Superstition. Liz turned as High Chair Arvin Dreek of the Arcath Dominion approached. The warlord's towering frame was encased in ceremonial crimson armor, his scaled visage locked in a look of disdain. They were primitives who found the stars too daunting, Dreek sneered. They ran and left their hollow monument to linger like a ghost in this chamber. He cast a contemptuous look at the empty seat. The only reason they are remembered is because we let them be. Liz studied Dreek carefully. The Arcath Dominion was one of the most militarized factions in the Concord. For centuries, their leaders had prodded at the mystery of Earth, growing bolder in their assertions that humanity had either perished in isolation or lacked the strength to return. And yet something in Dreek's tone betrayed more than dismissal. Was it fear? Before Liz could press the thought, the assembly's chime resounded, silencing the chamber. The meeting commenced. Discussions unfolded, trade disputes, border skirmishes, diplomatic grievances, but Liz found his mind drifting back to Earth's seat. He activated his wrist interface, pulling up historical archives. Official records were scarce, but there were whispers. A fleet that vanished when it ventured too close to Sol. A cryptic warning received from an unknown source. An entire warlord's armada retreating without a fight, their commanders refusing to explain why. Liz scrolled further. Then stopped. Classified record, level Omega. A restricted file, ancient yet untouched. He shouldn't be able to access it. And yet, it was right there. Almost as if waiting. His heart pounded as he tapped the file. The screen flickered. A shadowed figure appeared, a humanoid silhouette, blurred and indistinct. Then a voice, calm, measured, carrying an authority beyond rank or force. To those who come seeking answers, the seat was left empty by choice. Do not pursue us. Do not test us. If this message plays, you have already trespassed beyond caution. Let this be the only warning. The screen went dark. Liz stared, his mind racing. No threat. No anger. Just certainty. As if humanity had never feared the galaxy, but had chosen, for its own reasons, to turn away. He turned to Rose. Did you know about this? Rose's expression was grim. I suspected. But no one speaks of it openly. Liz felt a chill creep up his spine. There was something deliberate about all of this. As if humanity had never truly been absent, but merely watching. A sharp chime rang through the chamber. The floor beneath them trembled. Murmurs rose among the delegates. A new transmission had just overridden every system in the Concord. A deep, mechanical voice echoed through the chamber, emotionless and precise. Warning. Unauthorized entry detected in Sol system. Probe intercepted. No response required. Liz froze. Dreek's expression darkened. That was my probe. Whispers turned to shouts. The room was a storm of hushed panic. Liz turned toward the empty seat. It remained unchanged, still and quiet, as if nothing had happened. But something had. A message had been sent. And if history had taught the galaxy anything about Earth, it was that their silence was never without meaning. The chamber was chaos. Ambassadors muttered in dozens of languages, fear simmering beneath formal decorum. Liz Toval felt the weight of silence heavier than the noise around him. The probe. Dreek's probe. Destroyed without retaliation, yet with a message cold enough to freeze blood. Liz caught Dreek's gaze. The warlord's face was unreadable, but Liz saw the flicker of unease beneath the arrogance. Dreek broke eye contact first. Liz moved swiftly through the crowded chamber toward the private corridors. Rose intercepted him halfway. You're going after him, Rose said, not asking. I need to know what he's planning, Liz replied. You heard that warning. Rose's eyes narrowed. The Arceth Dominion does not listen to warnings. Liz didn't argue. He continued toward the Dominion Sector's council suite. Guards in red armor blocked the entrance. Ambassador Liz Toval, he stated. Requesting audience with High Chair Dreek. One of the guards placed a heavy hand on Liz's chest. Denied. Before Liz could protest, the door slid open. Dreek himself stood there, towering, his armor casting reflections off polished walls. Let him in, Dreek growled. Inside, the room was spare, tactical displays, fleet positions, encrypted communication relays. Dreek didn't sit. He stood before a holomap of the Sol system, the probe's last transmission flickering on repeat. You provoked them, Liz said quietly. Dreek's eyes remained on the holomap. I tested them. You crossed a line no one has dared to approach for millennia, Liz pressed. Dreek turned, his expression cold steel. And what have they done, Liz? They swatted away a toy. Nothing more. Power bluffs mean nothing if not backed by action. Liz shook his head. Their restraint is the answer. They do not act unless forced. Dreek sneered. I will force them. Liz felt his stomach tighten. You're playing with something none of us understand. The warlord's voice dropped to a whisper. Exactly. He stepped closer. Fear keeps this galaxy weak. We've all tiptoed around that empty seat for too long. The Arceth Dominion doesn't cower. Liz's voice was firm. You should reconsider. I will not, Dreek snapped. He tapped a control panel. In 3 standard days, we dismantle Earth's embassy on Veyron Prime. Publicly. A demonstration that the Dominion does not fear shadows. Liz felt the weight of those words crush him. You're going to start a war with a power that hasn't needed to lift a hand for 2,000 years. Dreek's voice was ice. Or prove they were never a power at all. Liz knew there was no reasoning. He turned on his heel and left. The corridors outside felt suffocating. Liz activated his calm. Rose. He's going to destroy the embassy. There was silence on the line. Then Rose spoke. Then we must stop him. Liz spent the night pulling every diplomatic string he could. Warnings. Pleas. Appeals to reason. The Dominion ignored them all. The next day, the public square beneath the Grand Assembly was filled. Delegates, media, and curious citizens gathered to witness the event. The towering structure of Earth's embassy, untouched for millennia, stood solemn and black, its surfaces without ornament, its presence undeniable. Dreek stood at the forefront, flanked by Dominion officers in full regalia. Liz pushed through the crowd toward the observation deck. Rose was already there, his face grim. They're going through with it, Rose said softly. Liz could only nod. Dreek raised a gauntlet hand. His voice boomed over the assembled multitude. For 2,000 years, we have allowed an empty throne to intimidate the Concord. No more. Today, the Dominion casts off superstition. He gestured. A Dominion officer approached the embassy structure, plasma charge in hand. Liz gripped the railing. The charge was placed at the embassy's foundation. The countdown began. 5. 4. Liz whispered. Stop. 3. Dreek's expression was triumphant. 2. The charge blinked red. 1. The detonation never came. Instead, the air vibrated with a deep resonance. All screens blinked out. All comms silenced. Gravity felt heavier. A voice, smooth and emotionless, echoed from nowhere and everywhere. This boundary was not to be crossed. The crowd fell silent. The embassy's black surface shimmered, folding in on itself, revealing intricate patterns that seemed older than time itself. You were warned. Dreek's bravado faltered. His officers stepped back. The air grew colder. The ground beneath the square vibrated. Let this be your only lesson. The embassy structure lifted from the ground, no engines, no visible force, rising effortlessly into the air. Then it simply vanished. Gone. Liz exhaled shakily. He turned to Rose, whose face was pale. Did you see that? Rose nodded slowly. We all did. Dreek's command ship broadcast a hasty retreat order. Dominion vessels scattered. Liz knew this was no show of power. It was restraint yet again. But how long would humanity hold back? Liz spoke softly, more to himself than anyone else. They were never absent. The Dominion fleet's retreat rippled through the galaxy like a pulse of panic. Systems that once trembled under Arvin Dreek's iron rule now whispered of his hesitation. Liz Toval watched the emergency broadcast from his quarters, each report colder than the last. Dominion ships recalled from front lines, officers refusing orders, colonies breaking allegiance. Rose entered without knocking. His face carried lines of fatigue Liz hadn't noticed before. They're losing control, Rose said, sitting without ceremony. They should, Liz muttered. They provoked something they couldn't grasp. Rose handed him a data tablet. Intercepted message from the Dominion High Command. Liz read silently. Dominion fleets were mobilizing again, this time, not for show. Dreek was preparing a full incursion into the Sol system. They're doubling down. Liz couldn't believe it. After everything? Rose's voice was low. Pride kills faster than weapons. Liz set the tablet down. We need to stop him. Rose shook his head. We have no authority. The Dominion acts independently. The Assembly won't challenge them. Then we're all trapped by one man's ego. Rose nodded grimly. We've always been. The next day, Liz received an encrypted transmission marked with the highest clearance, level Omega. Only a handful of people in the galaxy were ever meant to see such a file. He hesitated before opening it. The recording began with static. Then, a human voice, clear and measured, spoke. If you are hearing this, you stand on the edge of decisions that cannot be reversed. We observed. We understood. And we stepped back, not from weakness, but from mercy. Liz felt the weight of every syllable. The voice continued. Mercy is the highest strength. Do not test it. The recording ended with coordinates, Sol system border, automatic defense threshold. He closed the file and sat in silence. By the next cycle, the Dominion fleet crossed into Sol space. Liz stood in the Assembly's observation deck as real-time footage streamed in. Thousands of ships piercing the darkness, formations tight and aggressive. Dreek's voice filled the chamber, broadcast to all Concord members. The Arctic Dominion does not bow to whispers or empty warnings. We claim the Sol system for the future of galactic strength. The feed cut to static. Seconds later, distress signals flooded every channel. No explosions. No visible counterattack. Just silence, vessels lost, entire fleets blinking out of existence, vanishing as if they had never been. In the assembly chamber, no one spoke. Liz's heart pounded. He turned to Rose, who only whispered, "They're erasing them." Screen after screen went dark. Then, the chamber's lighting dimmed. A voice, ancient and resonant, filled the room, not through speakers, but as if spoken inside every delegate's mind. Demonstration complete. The floor beneath Liz seemed to tilt. Aggression will not be tolerated. The star charts projected around the chamber altered in real time. Entire Dominion strongholds marked as gone. No explosions. No debris. Just silence where once there had been power. Liz forced himself to breathe. A final message played, clear, direct, in every tongue. This suffices. The light returned to normal. The chamber remained frozen. Liz finally broke the silence. We are standing on the edge of annihilation. Rose spoke quietly. Only if we keep pushing. Liz turned, adrenaline still burning through his chest. I have to do something. Rose met his gaze. What? Liz didn't know. But sitting and watching was no longer an option. Hours later, Liz requested an emergency audience with the assembly. The chamber filled slowly. Delegates spoke in hushed, fearful tones. Dreek was absent. The Dominion seats sat as hollow as Earth's. Liz stood in the center, hands clasped tightly. I ask for silence, he began. The room quieted instantly. We have spent generations fearing the unknown. Today, we faced it. And it showed us restraint beyond comprehension. He paused, letting his words sink in. I do not speak to defend humanity. They need no defense. I speak to defend us from ourselves. He took a breath. We must cease provocation. Withdraw all forces. Offer apology, without expectation. If we do not, there will be nothing left to govern. A murmur of agreement spread through the chamber. Rose spoke from the Avanti seat. What do we send them? Liz answered without hesitation. Humility. Later that night, alone in his quarters, Liz received one final message. No sender. No trace. It was text only. We heard you. We accept. He read it 3 times before he could believe it. Humanity had answered. And for the first time, Liz felt hope. Liz Toval sat alone in the quiet of his chambers, staring at the message. We heard you. We accept. The words glowed softly, yet they felt heavier than entire fleets, heavier than laws or weapons. He replayed every moment of the last few days in his mind, Dreek's arrogance, the Dominion's pride, humanity's restraint. And now this. Not revenge. Not retribution. Acceptance. But what did acceptance mean to beings who had vanished from the galactic stage, only to show their hand without ever truly appearing? A soft chime broke his thoughts. His door slid open. Rose entered, pale and serious. You received it too? Rose asked. Liz nodded. We're acknowledged. Rose sat, folding his long limbs carefully. What happens now? Liz exhaled slowly. We respond. Rose leaned forward. With what? Liz tapped the table between them. A small projector flickered to life, displaying the symbol of the Concord. He hesitated, then spoke, as if choosing each word with care. We send a delegation to the edge of Sol. No weapons. No threats. Only representatives. We deliver respect. Rose shook his head slowly. And if they refuse contact? Liz looked up. Then we leave, grateful we were allowed to leave at all. The following day, the assembly chamber was packed, every delegate present. The tension was suffocating. Liz stood before them. I propose, he began, that the Concord send a single vessel to the Sol threshold. An unarmed envoy. The room erupted in murmurs and protests. An Uthery delegate hissed. What if they destroy it? Liz kept his voice calm. They won't. If they wanted us gone, we would already be gone. Another voice cut through, Grand Marshal Herrex of the Veruin. Why risk it? Why not leave them to their silence? Liz met his gaze. Because silence is no longer an option. We must meet the moment. For a long, tense pause, no one spoke. Then Rose stood from his seat. The Avanti support the motion. One by one, others followed. Reluctant. Fearful. But they knew. The alternative was ignorance, and that, they had all learned, was far more dangerous. 3 days later, Liz boarded the Pax Accord, a sleek, unarmed diplomatic vessel built for this singular purpose. No escorts. No hidden weapons. Only envoys and translators. At the docking bay, Rose stood by the ramp. "I should be the one going," Rose said softly. Liz smiled faintly. "No. You taught me to listen. Now I'll teach others." Rose placed a hand on his shoulder. "Come back." Liz only nodded. The ship departed under watchful eyes. The jump to the Sol system border was uneventful. In the command deck, Liz sat with the pilot and communications officer, silence thick between them. They arrived at the designated coordinates, the very edge of humanity's claimed space. Nothing appeared on sensors. No stations, no fleets. Only a quiet expanse of stars. "Open broadcast," Liz instructed. The officer nodded. Liz spoke calmly, his voice steady. "This is Ambassador Liz Toval of the Concord. We come without arms. We come with humility. We acknowledge the boundaries you have set. We seek only understanding and respect." The transmission echoed into the void. Seconds passed. Minutes. The pilot glanced nervously at Liz. Suddenly, space distorted ahead of them. A ripple, like heat over metal, and then something emerged. Not a ship. Not a station. A construct. Massive. Seamless. Blacker than the void itself. Its surface shifted like liquid obsidian, geometry folding and unfolding. The communications officer gasped. The construct spoke, not in words but in thought. A presence filled Liz's mind. "You come without demands. Without arrogance. This is understood." Liz closed his eyes and focused. "We wish to show respect. To learn what we must not repeat. There is little to teach. You already know. You spoke when others threatened. You reasoned when others blustered. That is sufficient." Liz felt the weight of those words settle inside him. "May we ask why you left?" A pause. "Because it was never about power. Power is loud. Wisdom is silent. The galaxy was not ready to hear us. So we watched. And waited." Liz gathered his thoughts. "And now? Now you stand at the precipice. Choose wisely. Do not force the lessons that need not be given." The construct pulsed once, and then, as suddenly as it had appeared, vanished. The silence that followed was profound. The communications officer whispered, "Did that really happen?" Liz nodded. "Yes." He turned to the pilot. "Set course back to Concord space." The return trip was quiet, contemplative. When they arrived, the assembly was already gathered. Liz took his place at the center once again. He spoke slowly, deliberately. They answered. Not with threats. Not with superiority. But with wisdom. He met the gaze of each delegate in turn. They watched because they could. They waited because they knew we weren't ready. But they are still there. And they will remain there. The hall was utterly silent. Liz continued, his voice steady. Earth's seat will remain empty. But not forgotten. Not feared. Respected. He paused. And if we're wise, we will leave it that way. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, the delegates stood, a silent show of unity and understanding. The galaxy would remember this day. And Earth's empty seat would no longer be a mystery. It would be a monument. A warning. And a promise.